welcome to our viewers in Nigeria and across the world. It is a big day indeed, and Lunchtime Politics begins right now. Well, all eyes on the Senate as it begins screening of 28 ministerial nominees of President Bola Tinubu amidst need for urgent welfare, economic and security interventions. President Tinubu to address the nation in what will be his second nationwide broadcast for subsidy removal, and the government's response to the hardship faced by Nigerians are expected to top that list. The governor of Ministerial of Adamawa State relaxes 24-hour curfew imposed to curb the looting of Nema's warehouse in the state as police arrests 80 suspects in connection to that incident. Welcome to the program, and we'll begin with the top story. Nonetheless, all is now set for the commencement of a screening of ministerial nominees sent to the Senate by President Bola Tinubu just last week. Well, today's screening process will have the nominees appear before the lawmakers, who will either ask them questions to determine their competences or ask them to take a bow and go, as it is the tradition for former lawmakers. But the ministerial nominees were given a deadline between July the 20th and 30th to submit their credentials to the Office of a Senior Special Assistant to the President on National Assembly Matters, Abdullahi Gumel, and many of them were seen yesterday trying to beat that deadline. All of the 28 nominees are expected to have completed all necessary documentation before the screening. Channels Television is live at the Senate right now to bring you more updates. Our correspondent Kayla Megwa now joins us on Lunchtime Politics to tell us what exactly is going on. It's good to see you, Kayla. Such a big day at the Senate. All eyes really on that chamber. So can you tell us what exactly is going on right now at this point? Because a lot of people had expected that the screening would have begun already.
Well, the screening has not started yet. In fact, if you can see behind me, quite a number of lawmakers, quite a number of senators walking into the Senate chambers right now, getting ready for this particular screening process, but the Senate President is not here yet. It's a very small chamber, so the number of guests that they're allowed to bring in is very limited. It's going to be very tight, really. But we're seeing the arrivals of senators for this particular screening process, and looking forward to what the conversations are going to be. I was listening to you earlier, the question about whether someone will be asked to pass or, if someone will be grilled. And that's something a lot of Nigerians will be interested in. Remember that these 28 ministerial nominees have not been given portfolios, at least to our knowledge yet. But it will be very important to hear what kind of questions they are asked. They're going to be questions that border on their backgrounds. They're going to be some kind of leading as to what kind of ministries that they would be in charge of in the nearest future. So that's something that we're looking out for. We're also looking out for a lot of the things that will be said in the sidelines of this particular event. And we're seeing that, happening with a lot of media. A lot of people are trying to find out what the conversations are going to be here today. Remember, this first 28 is not the entire list. We still have more people who will be sent in by President Tinubu. None of that has been made clear to us yet. What we do know about the nominees that have been sent is that at least 20 of them have undergone a lot of security checks, and we can see them ready for today's event. So we're looking at that happening in the nearest few hours or minutes, so to speak. But we do have quite a number of people. We see them walking across the cameras. A lot of conversations going on, a lot of people walking around the whole place, trying to get themselves together for this particular event, Kayode.
I can see that that's a beehive of activities. Looks like it's going to be a long day, really. But what more can you tell us, Kayla, about the mood of perhaps some of the lawmakers you have seen? Are they huddled up in different areas, maybe having conversations? Generally, what is the mood? And does this look like it might take a long time before they finally get settled and begin this?
Well, we did notice that a lot of the lawmakers who started coming in earlier, they would be in huddles, just talking in very low tones. Security got very tight around here. If you notice, we're outside of the chamber. That's because entrance into the chamber has been restricted. Our correspondent Linda Kigbe is actually sequestered upstairs in the gallery because she's not allowed to come out as well. So there's a lot of security in this place right now. But we're seeing a lot of lawmakers, talking in very low tones. Some of them very smiley. I was looking at Otumba Gbenga Daniel smiling as he was walking into the chambers. Quite a lot of conversations have happened. You can tell that a lot of conversations have happened over the weekend. So today's event will be one that we're looking out to see exactly what the outcome of a lot of these conversations are going to be. But excited, that is the mood in the Senate today. Excited, anticipating the conversations really. So that's what we're seeing right now. But it doesn't look like something that's going to end today. Some people are actually saying that, this may take a few more days, but we don't know. What we do know about the screening exercise for today is that it's going to be on a first-come, first-served basis. So those who've gone through the security checks are the people who are going to be, the first people who will be screened here today. So that's what we're looking out for, Kayode.
Just before I let you go, Kayla, I know, again, there's a lot happening around, but have you seen any of the nominees arriving? There's some images on social media showing some of them perhaps arriving in their vehicles, taking photographs. Have we seen any of them yet? And if we have, which of them?
None in the Senate chamber yet. That I can tell you. But we do know that a lot of people have arrived. Yeah. Like I said earlier, the number of supporters, that's something a lot of them are having to deal with right now, is that the number of supporters that they brought will probably not be allowed in these chambers today. But we do know that a lot of them have arrived. Of course, being early and getting ready for, the events of the day, but none in the Senate chamber yet as we speak.
Indeed. Our correspondent Kayla Mego are live at the Senate, just right outside, monitoring all of the proceedings. Our correspondent Linda Akibe is also inside the chamber, so you will not miss any bit of this. Thank you so much, Kayla, for that update. We'll come back to you as soon as there's more. It is a major national assignment right there in the hands of the senators, and all eyes will be on them to see how they coordinate this. So stay with Channels Television. We'll bring you the live images from the Senate as soon as the screening begins. But away from the legislature for a moment, in what will be his second nationwide broadcast, President Bola Tinubu will address Nigerians today at 7 p.m. That's according to his spokesman, Mr. Dele Alake. Although the agenda for the broadcast has not been made known, it might not be unconnected to the economic pain which has been experienced by Nigerians amid the removal of subsidy on premium motor spirit, also known as petrol. Well, there seemed to be no respite for Nigerians after President Tinubu, in his inaugural speech on May the 29th, announced the removal of petrol subsidy. With the announcement, the pump price of a litre of petrol rose from 184 naira to 500 naira. That's less than 2 months later. The price jumped from 500 naira to over 617 naira, and that's on July the 18th. This, as you would expect, elicited anger and criticism from economically stranded citizens. Well, the government had announced plans for cash transfer to vulnerable Nigerians, but the labor unions rejected the hike in the price and the 8,000 naira palliative to be rolled out, threatening to embark on a nationwide protest from Wednesday, August the 2nd. Well, speaking of the labor unions, the Niger Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress are mobilizing ahead of Wednesday. That's just 2 days away, by the way. And they're calling out Nigerians on the streets to protest the hardship faced following the removal of fuel subsidy in the country. The action, which is billed for the Unity Fountain in Abuja, is meant to force government to retreat on its position on fuel subsidy. The senior advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Femi Hapalana, has given back into the movement, saying that it is untrue that the courts have restricted the labor movement from embarking on any strike or protest. For the Nigeria Employees Consultative Association, that's NECA, the NLC and TUC should rethink their planned action, as the events pose serious danger for the survival of sustainable enterprises, it says. In the meantime, a former president of the TUC, Mr. Peter Sele, has been reacting to the planned demonstration by the NLC and the TUC, and he says, although he is not impressed with the steps taken so far to cushion the effect of fuel subsidy removal, he thinks the timing is inappropriate.
Labour Congress have every right to protest. But if you talk in terms of timing, my worry will be they may likely lose it on the street. That's one, because there's so much pressure. And then secondly, you just see what is happening at Adamawa. You just reported it. Now there's no protest. People are already going to, it's not just going to NEMA's office and breaking in and moving green. And they're all shouting, there's too much hunger in the land. I'm aware that Governor Finitri also declared a curfew, 24 hours curfew. The reason why some people are already breaking into shops and looting. So you can imagine when protest and strike now start, it may be something that government may not be able to control, or Nigerian Labour Congress may also not be able to control. So we need to move beyond platitude and do what is needful to make Nigerians have hope. The federal government would have allowed Labour to go ahead and issue an ultimatum. Because right now it will be very difficult for Ajero to back out. If he back out, he's going to be accused of a sellout. And then the other option for government is that government should come out with a plan and say, this is what we are doing.
Well, that's not the only thing for President Bola Tinubu to contend with. In fact, he and other Ecowas leaders have given Niger Republic military leaders 7 days to return power to the ousted president or face a range of stiff sanctions, including the use of force. This stance was taken by the leaders during the extraordinary session of the Authority of Heads of State and Government of Ecowas, which took place at the presidential villa in Abuja. The union also imposed land border closures and no-fly zone concessions. Among other sanctions, our State House correspondent Larry Lassisi reports.
Presidents and representatives of 12 member states of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, arrived for the extraordinary session of the union. The meeting, which was convened by the President of Nigeria and the ECOWAS chairperson, President Bola Tinubu, is to consider the socio-political developments in the Republic of Niger. Welcoming those present, he urged them to take a strong stand on the matter.
I want us to be strong, forceful, and resolute about the survival of Bassem, as well as the freedom and restoration of the constitutionally elected body in the Niger Republic.
When the communique was presented, it was indeed a strong stand by the union. They called for the immediate release and reinstatement of President Mohamed Bazoum as President and Head of State of the Republic of Niger, and for the full restoration of constitutional order in that country. They also rejected any form of resignation that may purportedly come from President Bazoum.
In the event the authorities' demands are not met within 1 week, take all measures necessary to restore constitutional order in the Republic of Niger. Such measures may include the use of force. To this effect, the chiefs of defense staff of ECOWAS are to meet immediately.
While condemning the pronouncement of support by some foreign governments and foreign private military contractors, some sanctions were also announced.
Closure of land and air borders between ECOWAS countries and Niger. 2, institution of ECOWAS no-fly zone on all commercial flights to and from Niger. Suspension of all commercial and financial transactions between ECOWAS member states and Niger. Freeze all service transactions, including energy transactions. Impose travel ban and asset freeze for the military officials involved in the coup attempt.
The resolutions taken by ECOWAS was applauded by the chairperson of the African Union Commission and the Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for West Africa and the Sahel, who were present. In his closing remarks, President Tinubu encouraged African leaders to take steps to foster stability and progress in their countries.
We will stand with our people and freedom and our commitment to the rule of law and not the barrel of gold. Africa has come of age. We reject coup, an interruption to constitutional order.
Now, one thing that has been emphasized here is that most of the resolutions taken here will take effect immediately. There's a determined air from this meeting that the presidents of Ecowas will insist that this region is governed by the principles of democracy, rule of law, and good governance. From the presidential villa, Lanre Lassisi, Channels Television News.
From regional politics and security to another kind of regional security, this time on a national scale. We begin from this one. As acclaimed leader of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu has directed Finland-based separatist agitator and IPOB loyalist Simon Ekpa to desist forthwith from issuing any sit-at-home order in the southeast under any guise. Nnamdi Kanu, speaking through his special counsel, Aloy Jimako, in a press statement, says he has had a conversation with Simon Ekpa and instructed him to end all sit-at-home orders forthwith, including the Monday sit-at-home and any other proposed sit-at-home in the southeast. The statement also says Nnamdi Kanu told Simon Ekpa to refrain from antagonizing governors or persons in political positions. He says anybody still engaged in sit-at-home is not his disciple, maintaining that haters of Biafra and mindless murderers in uniform are hiding under the cover of combating forces of sit-at-home to unleash mayhem against Igbos. And peace was temporarily disrupted in Owerri, the state capital of Imo, following a robbery incident by a notorious gang that has been tracked by the police for a while now. The gang of six attacked a gold store and supermarket, attempting to cart away gold worth millions of naira, but they were stopped by the special forces of the police command. Well, after a gun duel, one of the suspects was killed, two were arrested, and the other three fled with bullet wounds. The suspects were later paraded at the command's headquarters in Owerri. Its public relations officer, Henry Okoye, gives details about the attack and recoveries made. So, I mean, we'll get you that subsequently, but let's get into the conversation. It is a big one, the situation in the southeast. It is something we have followed now for months and even years. So let's get an update on the situation from the directive from Mr. Nnamdi Kanu to the situation on ground. It is a Monday, don't forget that. So how well is this new order being followed through with? We are joined by Mr. Jerry Chukwueke, who is a Chief Technical Advisor to the Imo State Governor on the new Imo project. It's good to have you on the program.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
You know, I want to begin with what's happening at the national scale. There's a ministerial screening going on. Imo State, I believe, has one nominee in that list.
So far,
so
yes.
I imagine that your eyes will also be on what's going on. And I wonder, for your nominee and generally speaking, how is the Southeast handling the ministerial nominees? Do you feel adequately represented, at least?
Well, constitutionally and from a viewpoint of what is required to be done, we will have at least one minister from each of the states, and perhaps more. We have to see how Mr. President is constituting his team. And I know that he's trying to strike a very important balance in terms of having technocrats and people who know to do the job, and also to balance it out with the politics of it. We'll see. It's still unfolding. There's the next batch that will come forth soon.
Indeed. So definitely we'll be following up with that. But let's talk about, the recent trends in the Southeast. Last time we had a conversation, it was about, the Lagos angle to it, the businessmen in Lagos, what is being done. And then we touched on the situation in the Southeast a little bit. But ever since that time, has there been any improvements?
Oh, without a doubt, But let me say this. Normally from my residence in Ikoyi to your studio, in ordinary times would have taken 2.5 hours to get here. Today it took some 30 minutes.
That's a miracle.
The reason is that the vehicles are just not on the streets and on the roads. And this is the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. The truth of the matter is that Nigerians across this nation are hurting. The pain is real. It's not a jovial matter. One can understand the argument because everybody who was a candidate for the presidency proposed subsidy removal. And one will make the point that having made that proposition, that they also should have been ready from day one with their palliative strategy and how to cushion the pains for Nigerians. We get it. That's fair argument. But having said that, you also must bear in mind that it would have required some 60 to 90 days at least to now have a good feel for the impact of subsidy removal. Now we're getting that feel because about 40% or more of the local fuel PMS consumption, as we were told prior the removal of subsidy, simply don't exist. It's all because of the smuggling, the fraud, and clearly because Nigerians have also stepped down their usage of PMS. So I make that point. It required that time to make that adjustment and have a good feel for what the savings potentially would be and how best to deploy that to now really help Nigerians. So you can see why Mr. President has introduced the infrastructure support fund. The reason is that they're looking at the savings coming out of all of this and how best to deploy them, particularly with what the states can do. And in Imo, which becomes an issue for us.
Because I'm trying to see how you link that to the situation in the Southeast.
That's the point. Yeah. So if you look at Imo and what's happening in the Southeast as well, the key to all of this is good governance. That's number one. Our people expect and demand good governance at all levels. With this situation of the pain that people are going through in Nigeria, there's also a need in the Southeast and across the country for everybody, all the arms of government to stand on the moral high ground by way of reducing the cost of governance. So if you now bring that back down to Imo and the Southeast, our great governor is running this race because we know that the clock is ticking. Just 2 days ago, he had a security meeting with all 690 autonomous communities in our state, brought in and committed some funds to further support local security arrangements. He has now taken a bold step to wave the olive branch of amnesty to all the criminals, the criminal elements. You could see that from the robbery you just talked about, and those who are agitating or extremists, or even those who are being incited by political interest, to say, go to your traditional ruler, quietly, in confidence, make the commitment to lay down your arms that the government of Imo State will rehabilitate.
So is this as a result? We know elections are close.
Yes.
And I mean, prior to elections, you see lots of moves, literally see things that didn't happen previously with politicians happening. Some of them go on the streets, they join market women, eat corn, help them to hawk their products and all of that. So some will say naturally you'll see all of these activities.
No, but that's
because
not
he's seeking re-election.
No, but that's not well. He's done this before. This amnesty issue is beyond politics. Let me talk about that for a minute.
Because, just add this to it, because we've seen this linger. I mean, he's been in power now for close to 4 years now.
Yes.
And we've seen this situation linger. In fact, some will say it's even heightened in recent times.
Yes.
With now new sit-at-home orders being, ordered by, the breakaway group or whatever the term is. So what is different this time around?
Well, don't forget that Imo State is the gateway of the Southeast. I just want to get you, look at the trajectory. So if you are an agitator, for example, or whatever the groups are, and you access Imo State on the Enugu-Umuahia Expressway, and that's towards Okigwe North, you have access to Abia, access to Enugu State, and Ebonyi State. If you access the security situation from the Olu aspect of our state, you are accessing Anambra and Rivers State. That's why Imo, more times than not, seems to be a flashpoint because of that strategic gateway positioning that we have naturally. It also has its great advantage because as our governor restores more peace and quiet, it means that that comes to play with regards to our own developmental, economic, and commercial opportunities because we remain the gateway of the Southeast. So I explain that a bit, but let me go further. Yeah. What our governor is doing is to essentially say, please, we know that the federal government and the security infrastructure is now lost patience in the Southeast with all the extremists and agitators and criminals moving about. And they're coming. And he says, we don't want any more bloodletting in Imo State. And he's anxious to ensure that a lot of the funds that have gone to supporting security infrastructure in Imo can be now moved in the development of Imo. That's one of his real passions and pain.
So essentially you're saying that even if he doesn't get a second term, all of this is selfless in some sense.
Let me tell you, we know he will get a second term, but I make the point.
That's left to the people.
Oh, yeah. But the facts are there and our people are responding positively. But let me say this. People have said to me, why hasn't your governor launched his re-election campaign? Have you noticed? It's because of his mantra of good governance and Imo first. He wants to focus on getting Imo as stable as possible, peace and quiet, because that's what gives us the opportunity for all the economic plans he has laid out. So I say that because Imo first and his mantra of good governance takes precedence.
Clearly, as I said the last time, the coming weeks and months will be very interesting. Perhaps we'll continue this. But I'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Jerry Chikwueze, as a Chief Technical Advisor to the Imo State Governor on the new Imo project.
That's it. Thank you.
I like the sound of that. Thank you so much.
Very much. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, let's head over to Adamawa State now and tell you that the government has revised the curfew imposed on the state due to recent unrest and looting of government warehouses in the state capital by hoodlums over the weekend. The curfew, initially set for a 24-hour period, has now been relaxed from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. with immediate effect. And in response to the attack and looting of a Nima storehouse by hoodlums, the Deputy Governor of the state, Professor Kaletapwa Ferrata, along with heads of security units, conducted a tour of some areas in the state capital before visiting the Nima warehouse where the hoodlums gained access and stole various items. Well, that's the program for this afternoon, but we're not done yet with all of the big stories of the day. We'll still have our eyes on the Senate, where that screening is going to be commencing soon, and all of the other big stories to break today. So stay with Channels Television, your home for the news. I'm Kayode Okikulu. Goodbye.